Red alert. Red alert. Red alert.
Hello world, it's Birdo Prey 5 Qapla, and welcome to my 5 most shocking nitpicks. I know, shocking. Nitpicks for Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 3, 17 seconds.
My father is one of the greatest Starfleet engineers that ever lived. People were fine with me following in his footsteps, but the moment I decided to be a pilot, oh boy. She's here because Starfleet couldn't say no to Geordi La Forge's daughter.
And what was it that she was doing that Geordi La Forge wasn't known for, I guess? What was it? Well, she wanted to be a pilot. She wanted to helm a starship. The only problem with that is that was literally Geordi La Forge's first job we ever saw in Star Trek The Next Generation Season 1.
Course set, Captain.
Speed, warp 7.
Aye, sir, warp 7.
Engage.
He wore a red shirt. He was the helmsman of the Enterprise D. The joke was the blind guy was flying the ship. His daughter, wanting to be a helmsman of a starship, wanting to be the pilot of a starship, is following in Geordi's footsteps. But what we do know for sure is that Geordi absolutely was a pilot before he was an engineer. And for his daughter to say that what she's doing is not following in his footsteps is batshit crazy. That was number one. Okay. The second nitpick for this episode is the portal gun. The portal gun, we see it used 3 times, and each time it works differently than the first. The very first time we see it used, it appears that the portals open at the exact same time. The first portal and the second portal are open at the same instant, and as soon as the ship goes through one, it's coming out the other, and then both portals close at the exact same time. The next time we see it used in this episode, besides taking quite a long time for the portals to be created, the first portal opens, the ship goes entirely within the first portal, then the second portal opens, the first portal is completely closed, and then the ship comes out of the second portal. So for an instant, the ship is nowhere in real space. Minor difference, but completely different. Then the third time we see it used is where they shoot the photon torpedoes through it, and then a few seconds later, the torpedoes reappear behind the ship, but this time the weapon was deployed much faster than in either the first 2 options. And then finally, we have to think back, because the portal gun was used in that very first episode. The portal gun was used to destroy the building. I mean, it would make no sense for this to be 2 completely different portal weapons, but it also would make no sense that the Shrike was anywhere near Metalis Prime when that first building was destroyed. But assuming it is the same portal weapon, we don't see any of these plasma balls that the portal weapon apparently is generated from. In that first episode, when the building was destroyed, it was just a whole bunch of light around the building, and then the building fell through the planet into itself, or a few 100 yards away. So very similar, but again, a completely different way of the portal gun working. I don't care how it works. I just think it should remain consistent. Okay. On to number 3.
How does she keep finding us?
it's kind of two things. It's Jack Crusher. Number one, Jack Crusher, why does he go to the bridge, or quote, quote, why does he not go to the bridge? Okay, after getting the idea that there's a breadcrumb trail, that the Titan is leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, he should be telling this to Captain Riker and Admiral Picard. He absolutely should. For whatever reason, he doesn't use the comm system, which would be the absolute quickest way to tell them this. Instead, he takes the long way around and is actually stopped by a guard for the very first time I can think of in Star Trek history. And maybe there's a Voyager episode or something where there was a guard placed somewhere else. But for the very first time in Starfleet history that I can remember, a guard actually stops somebody from going on the bridge, says, hey, we're at red alert, you can't come on the bridge. Fine, that actually makes some sense, but later in this episode, we see there is a turbo lift. There's a turbo lift that opens directly on the bridge. Further, Admiral Picard took the turbo lift from sickbay directly to the bridge. So if he wants to get to the bridge as quickly as possible from sickbay, why didn't he not just take that turbo lift, which had no guard? Could have entered right on the bridge and say, hey, Captain, Admiral, they're following us. We're leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. And we could have skipped this whole, the second part of this nitpick is why would he go to 7 of all people? 7 is in confinement. He has no idea of 7's history. At least we have no reason to think he does. It's just a ridiculous decision to make. Only for sake of the plot. The number 4 issue, and one of my biggest pet peeves with this entire episode. Now, I'll be honest. I thought this was the best episode to date. I actually thought this wasn't a bad episode. But one of the most awful parts about this episode is the Riker-Picard relationship. Specifically, them in conflict on the bridge. When Captain Shaw takes himself out of command and hands command over to Riker, which itself is kind of like a what? I thought he already handed command over to Admiral Picard at the end of last episode. At the beginning of this episode, Shaw is back in command. It was Admiral Picard just minutes ago. Now it's Captain Shaw again. Then Captain Shaw tells Riker, you did this, which he didn't. You get us out of it. And he literally transfers the command codes to Captain Riker. So now Riker's in command. Picard is his quote-unquote number 1. But they are arguing about what to do, basic strategy, on the bridge in front of all the other crew members.
You are out of line.
We cannot allow it to make us weak.
Sit down, Admiral.
Well, how many times must your strategy fail before you change it? It's not working!
Sit down, Admiral. I'm the captain of this ship.
This is something that never would have happened in TNG. In fact, there was an entire TNG episode where Data took command and he brought Worf in. Worf made a suggestion very similar to Picard. Worf made the suggestion to fight, and Data wasn't ready to fight. And in this whole episode, Picard keeps suggesting fighting, and Riker doesn't want to fight. But for, 1/10 of the difference in opinion that Picard had with Riker, Data had with Worf, and he pulled Worf in to his ready room, and in privacy said, hey, you're completely out of line. If you can't do this job, I'll find somebody who can. And within a minute, Worf realized his mistake, apologized, and said, "I'm sorry if anybody put our friendship at risk, it was me." So there is no way that Riker and Picard would be arguing like this unless they explain this in the next episode. Maybe this was a ruse for someone else's benefit. That's the only thing I could possibly think of. But even then, why is Riker and Picard in command of this starship? They literally have no idea how the ship even works. In the very first episode, they showed us that they didn't know the latest, the way this ship works. Picard was saying, "Don't you think we should contact engineering?" And Seven is like, "Oh, we don't have to do that anymore. It's automated." These people, they used to know what they were doing, but Riker hasn't been in command in a number of years, at least 5. Picard even longer than that. They should have the next person in line be the first officer. Even if Riker was put in command, you would get input from somebody who knows how the ship works. Okay, if Riker Riker should have just pulled Seven, out of confinement immediately and said, Seven, come to the bridge. But even if you say, okay, there's too much going on, he's too busy, he's not thinking of bringing Seven back on the bridge at the moment. Well, fine, there's so many other officers. There's your science officer. There's Sidney La Forge. There's 3 other people on the bridge. Any of those people, presumably, would have far more knowledge of how the Titan A works than either him or Picard. You would at least bring one of them up into your little circle to get opinions on what to do next. They probably have something beneficial to say. Instead, every other character is just stuck at their station, looking into the distance like, oh my God, I can't believe our futures are in Tweedledee and Tweedledum. No offense to Riker and Admiral Picard, but they admittedly don't understand how the ship even works anymore.
Remove yourself from the bridge. You've just killed us all.
And this vile line that Riker ends with, telling Captain Picard he's killed us all and to get off the bridge. I'm sorry, but I would sooner believe this Commander Riker exists.
We won't go back. You don't know what it's like in our universe. The Federation's gone. The Borg is everywhere. We're one of the last ships left, please. You've got to help us.
I'm sorry, there's no choice. If this works, everything will return to...
No, we won't go back!
Then the Commander Riker we see in this episode. This scene alone makes me think that this is so over the top, not Commander or Captain Riker, that I feel like maybe, just maybe, this is a hint that this isn't really Captain Riker. We'll see. I don't know. And the final and 5th major shocking nitpick. When the changelings are revealed and Worf and Raffi are interrogating him, and he tells us some very scary stuff.
It's too late. Klingon, human, solid, your worlds are on the verge of destruction. So, your Federation will crumble.
You're like, oh my God, this is so terrible. What drama. Oh, wait. I know for absolute fact, none of that is going to happen. Now, you could say, well, of course they're not going to destroy Earth in Star Trek. Of course they're not going to destroy Kronos. in Star Trek. But you know what? They did destroy Vulcan in the JJ movies. You know, maybe they would do something. False, because Star Trek Discovery exists.
Madam President.
Madam President.
Welcome. I am so pleased that you've come. We are eager to begin diplomatic discussions.
Nothing to discuss. United Earth is ready right now to rejoin the Federation. And nothing could make me happier than to say those words.
That's right. Star Trek Discovery still exists. And in Star Trek Discovery, we know Earth and the Federation are still going to be there in 1,000 years. So what drama could they what drama could there be? This is all fake. We know they're going to win. We know the Federation is going to come out on top, not just because that it's Star Trek and they're not going to end the show with the Federation being destroyed, but because we already have a series 1,000 years in the future, and we know Earth still exists. We know the Federation still exists. Yeah, it had its issues, but for the most part, it's still there. Clearly, whatever they're threatening to happen here never happened. And that's why we can have good Star Trek as long as Star Trek Discovery remains canon. I mean, and that's why those are the 5 biggest nitpicks with Star Trek Picard. But really, that last nitpick, it's kind of the mother of all nitpicks. What can you really do? Qapla All, bird out.